call this meeting to order, the Tuesday, February 17th, 2015 meeting of Morrisville Borough Council. We'll start with a moment of silent prayer, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Nancy Sherlock will be absent today, but she will be joining us by telephone. And Nancy, you're on speaker now. She just said she was on her way here, so she couldn't get a hold of me, but now she's going back into her house. Okay. I'll start with the roll call.
Dave Ravella.
Here.
Nancy Sherlock. Here. Freddie Kerner.
Here.
Victor Cicero.
Here.
Jeffrey Johnson.
Here.
Frank Chronicle.
Here.
Ted Parker.
Here.
Tom Sanford.
Here.
Debbie Smith.
Here.
And Nicholas is not here tonight.
Not here.
Sean.
Here.
Kenny. Tom Bates and Robert Sophie.
And now I'm a bit scattered due to a death in the family this week, so I'm going to ask that Vic Cicero preside over this meeting, if he would be so inclined.
He does, and I would suggest, if he accepts, that we do this in the form of a motion, just to have him temporarily run the meeting as chair.
So I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion.
Should I make a motion, or should I just say?
You made a motion, he seconded it, so we can call the question.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So it passes 8-0. Yes.
Okay, Nancy.
Good evening. I see you want a kind agenda. Approval of the minutes. Your motion to approve the minutes of the regular council meeting of the hearing of the public. How about that? We can breeze right through this. The first name we have here is Ms. Berger, Jane Berger. Oh,
We go back a long way, Bill. Good evening, Jane Berger, 90 West Maple Avenue, Morrisville. A couple things on tonight's agenda, then some other points. I noticed under new business, you're approving the Winter Press Parade for December 5th. Small point, but maybe you should say it's for 2015. Just kind of put the year in. It's nice you're doing that ahead of time, because I'm sure that helps their planning. Under new business 10A, you have a motion to proceed with closing the Harry S. Williamson Trust Fund. I don't see a motion that says how you're going to reinvest or what you're going to do with that trust money. And maybe I missed it if you discussed it at the agenda meeting when that was held. But this trust was established, and you have to go back probably 1939. I think that's when there was the lease for a portion of it, and when Mr. Williamson made available this land and deeded it to the borough. A trust was set up at this time. If you all look at your budgets under revenues, you see a line item that's maybe only a couple $100 every year, and that's the interest from a bank account, from a bank, as we understood, was out in the Lancaster area, which was from the Williamson Trust. We really didn't know the amount of it. We knew we couldn't touch the principal, but Mr. Williamson set this up at the time the Williamson Parkland came to us back in 1939, I guess the interest was enough to cover the maintenance of the park, which, as we know, and I can't do the math to count the number of years from 2015 back to 1939, and the recreation fund budget, we know it takes more than several $100s to maintain our jewel of a park, Williamson Park. So I would ask, before you close out the trust, that you be sure you understand what the terms and conditions were of the trust when it was established, if it's still valid, if it still dictates that the principal has to be preserved and just the interest or dividends used. Certainly you would want to put that money in a bank that pays you the best rate and charges lowest fees. But just, you know, this has been around for quite a while, maybe worthwhile to authorize your solicitor to do that research, whether it's in the minutes, or we have deeds downstairs, so, you know, there may be an old resolution of when that trust was established, just to make sure you don't inadvertently close out a trust fund with not making the proper provisions to secure those monies. If the trust is such that it can be, I hate to use the word broken because it's negative, but if it's considered not viable and there's something else, then at the point you close this out, I would still ask the borough to do 2 companion motions, one doing that and also deciding how you're going to use those funds and how they're going to be secured. I'd really hate to see whatever these monies are, because it doesn't give the amount in the item on the agenda, just not be put into the operating fund of the recreation and, you know, gone within 1 year. You're looking for open space match, so there's some things that would require some discussion to make sure the best use of the principles of that trust, if they can in fact be spent. Thank you for that. Several months I've been asking, I began informally with our manager, asking about the showcase, the kiosk outside for the posting of all public notices, which includes the annual listing of all borough and board meetings. So I hope Mr. Bates will enlighten us this evening to let us know, have they been ordered, when will they arrive, and when they will be installed, because you really are out of compliance with the law, and I would hope Mr. Kilkenny would agree with that, because there are certain notices that have to be placed in a public space that's not inside the operational part of the borough, that they would be available otherwise. We know with the new glass it's energy efficient, but you can't see anything posted on the inside like we were able to do in the past. There's just really no reason. The minutes have been in since August, and here we're now in February, so it needs to be done, or there can be further action taken to bring you into compliance. There was an appointment at the special meeting. It was a resolution for the tax collector. Whatever the vote was, or who was, you know, finally given the majority of the nomination, that's not my concern. That's not why I'm here this evening. But, you know, reviewing the tape, and I see you've got the minutes for approval on your agenda tonight. As I recall, the motion was to avoid a tax collector to collect borough taxes, and Mr. Sherlock said the name would be inserted. You proceeded then to go and do your nominations, and there was a person that received 5 votes, which is the majority, and then it was stated that person, you know, would be the tax collector. I don't recall, and you can double check your minutes, but reviewing the tape, I don't recall ever hearing the vote on the actual resolution. You know, you would ask the second and the first if they want to insert the name. I'm not saying the name because it's not important for my question. My question is, to avoid any complications or any difficulties for the person that has this appointment, you either redo that resolution or affirm it or something, where you do a resolution with the person's name and the council votes. It's this 2-step process. You did go around the table till you got the nomination of 5 votes for one person. But then you never actually voted on the resolution to appoint. So I call that your attention. Mr. Kilkenny, I would appreciate you would double check that, perhaps review the tape, and if you got the minutes in front of you, see if there ever was a vote on the resolution. Let's see, the kiosk resolution. The other question on the resolution, and I'm sure Mr. Kilkenny can clarify it tonight, it's stated to collect the borough taxes. If you would put in the minutes tonight a clarification of what borough means and that it's real estate taxes, because as I understand, the tax collector collects real estate taxes not only for the borough, but for the county and for the school district. So I bring that up because some people have asked, so if you can clarify or insert somewhere that when you say borough, you're meaning, you know, those three different taxing components. The final thing, and I am pleased that you, by a majority, are supportive of agenda meetings. And just make sure that, you know, since they're an official meeting of the council, you will do a public notice somewhere listing all those meetings for the end of the year. When you had this special meeting, and a resident asked what was going to be discussed that night, Mr. Sherlock said it was just that one item. Might have been proper to say, and at the end of that motion, we will continue with the special meeting for the purpose of doing a work session or an agenda session. Those terms are used interchangeably. But unfortunately, she adjourned the meeting, and then you went into the agenda setting. No harm, no foul, because there were no votes, but technically that was an illegal meeting under the Borough Code. You have three classes of meetings. Your regular meeting, a special meeting, or an emergency meeting. And I will admit, Mr. Cicero, when you were the borough manager and I came on council, we did it wrong for years until I was at a PSAB conference and found out what I just shared with you. So we, at that point, then advertised we advertised special meetings for every month, the purpose of which was to set the agenda and handle any other business that may come before us, the wiggle word. So in the event we needed to vote on something, we had the legal authority to do it. Prior to that, when we were out of compliance, if something came up, we would have to advertise a special meeting for that night. So since the mid to late 90s, we have been in compliance. There are minutes that have to be required, but obviously they're very basic because you're only doing discussion items and generally you're not voting on anything. So if you have not prepared a notice for the agenda meetings for the rest of 2015, I really urge you to do that ASAP, and at least until you have your agenda setting workshop for March. My goal is to keep my borough council in compliance, and I'm all for transparency and open government. The last item on the agenda, I'm just perplexed about following the guidelines of the Sunshine Law. That is a law, and you already are bound to follow those guidelines. There are certain things that are required by law. And you had this discussion, was it last year or so, and the residents were rightly outraged. Minutes were, 8 months or so before getting online. There was no agendas. There was no way to know anything that was going on. So at least after the fact, you had thorough meetings. And the Sunshine Law does provide for discussion on any motion when there is discussion. It's not a transcription. It's not, a stenographic report. It's not, verbatim. Anybody wants something, it can be attached to the minutes as something separate. So that really confuses me, since a motion doesn't supersede state law and you're already bound by that. So thank you for your attention.
Bill Stetzer.
I'm Bill Setzer from 806 Crown Street. I'm also the chairperson of the Morrisville EAC, which is the Environmental Advisory Council. First reason I came to speak to you tonight was to ask you what's become of the letter of intent that the solicitor sent to the school board. Have they responded? That was sent, I think, well over a month ago, 2 months perhaps. And I would like an answer to that. Then the other, and in addition to that, for those of you who may not know already, the school board has announced that tomorrow night, after their regular agenda meeting, they're going to have a special meeting taking some sort of vote on the M.R. Ryder property regarding the 3 possible reuse options. So I find it odd if they have responded that it hasn't been discussed here at council, and certainly if it has been, there has been a response. I think it's fair and appropriate that you would share that response with the public and the EAC. I'll move on to my second point, which perhaps is of a more happy nature. Perhaps 6 months ago, the the council asked the EAC would they work on developing a comprehensive plan for improvements to Williamson Park. And we have been working on that. We've been working on it during our regular meetings, our workshop meetings, and sometimes just visitations to the park as a group. We're working on a proposed trail map as well as other proposed amenities. We'd like to ask the Borough Council and the public in general to please contact us with any ideas, specific ideas and details if they can provide them as to what they'd like to see at the park. This isn't just what the EAC wants to see at the park. Additionally, the EAC has decided to try to involve the public further on making the best decision by holding a meeting on March 25th, Wednesday, March 25th, here at the Borough Hall. Would be our workshop meeting. And we would hope that the public attends in mass, shall we say, with their ideas so that we can collect them and review them and try to incorporate them into a plan that makes everyone happy and everyone benefits that way. So just wanted you to know, you haven't come to us, but I'm coming to you and telling you we're working on it. We hope that's still your interest and that when we come up with some plans, you'll be involved and perhaps we can implement them. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill.
Bill Farrell.
Bill Farrell, 347 North Pennsylvania Avenue. First thing tonight, this will be my last comment. I called the Eastern Court in Philadelphia, and I got in contact with a gentleman that works for Judge Wallace. I spent 15 minutes on the phone with him, and we were talking back and forth. Of course, he asked me a couple of questions. He asked me, am I a lawyer? You'd be surprised what I told him, Mr. Kilkenny. He asked me if I was a borough member of the borough. I said, no, I'm just an average citizen. He asked me what my concern was. I said, unfortunately, we spent over $300,000 on this cornerstone report. Unfortunately, too, you hired people in positions of authority who didn't do their job, or they were influenced by other people, and as a result, the people of Morrisville Borough are paying $300,000. There was the award to a couple of police officers of $185,000. I don't have a problem with that. I talked to him for in length 15 minutes. And I think the best thing at the end he says, you know how politics are. I said, that's all I wanted to hear. Because he said there could have been an agreement between the parties in a meeting and they presented it to the judge who signed it. And that's why it was sealed. He asked me, what did they tell you when you asked? I said, well, they told me it was sealed by the judge. So that's my last comment about that. To this day, I'm still not happy because I think there was a bunch of hanky-panky. Next. This is a copy of the meeting tonight. Okay, I'm getting a little better with the computer. That's the same meeting in one paragraph. It's all in one paragraph. Have you people ever seen it online? Can you read it? With the commas, with the question marks, with all that? I think you people ought to put it in this format so people, average people, can read it and don't try to figure out where one thing starts and one thing ends. Because on a lot of them, there's no periods. This is like having a novel with just keep writing and writing and writing with no periods. So maybe you could make it this instead of this. Because I have a heck of a time reading it. Because everything's jammed in there. That's my second thing. I came prepared tonight. Usually I just have a little hit list. The next thing. I have two articles from the Courier Times from January 28th. And it talks about the borough managers seeking a new man, will no longer be seeking the position of Mr. Bates. That's what it says in here. Unfortunately, I'm a pessimist. I don't believe it till it happens. But if you decide not, if you would need a letter of recommendation, give them my name. I hope they would appreciate it. The other one talks about another thing, the controller, about the salary. And if you people remember, probably not, relative to the controller, I read section 105, 3B from the Borough Code, which states 10,000 people or less, the audit should be $1,000. 20,000 people should be $2,000. And people have paid $6,000 2 or 3 times, which is 3 times the amount allotted according to this code. My question is, what's going on? Could I get a simple answer? And relative to the controller, I'm aware that there was a thing sent to the borough requesting copies of files from the controller, Mr. Hellman, Eric. He's been a controller since '07. Somebody tell me what has happened in the last 2 years where we have changed policies. For years before that, his father did it, and the records were given to him, and he would return them. And I know there was a reply by you, Mr. Kilkenny, that said he can come here during business hours. I assume that's between 8 and 5. I don't know. But this is the thing that bothers me. This was in effect for all these years. All of a sudden, something happened. Can somebody tell me what happened? Or don't you want to tell me what happened? Well, like I said, that thing that 105 3B tells you about how much your audits should be. Maybe you should look into that. Because I had talked about it in May and September of last year. Thank God the minutes are still there and I can find them. The next thing, that's about it. But I still want to remind people in Morrisville, elections are coming up this year. Get out and vote. You have your primary in May and the general in November. Don't sit at home and let the world go by. That's what's been happening in Morrisville for too long. It's about time to get your feet wet. Get out there and vote. In addition, I'm happy that you will now have 2 meetings a month. I don't know if you're happy, Victor, because you told me it was my fault that we have the 2. I didn't vote on it. 6 people up there voted. And then there was I said, Mr. Parker, would you introduce it? I don't remember, if you recall, I said, you better be careful, the Chicago 5's here tonight. Well, it wasn't. And then Mr. Sherlock said to me, Mr. Farrell, I guess the Chicago 5 wasn't here. No, it's the new one. It's called the Cincinnati 6. You have the Shanghai 6, the Chicago 5, and the Cincinnati 6. So everybody enjoy yourself and get ready for more snow. Thank you.
Sue Marlowe?
I have terrible handwriting, it's Joe.
Joe. I'm sorry. I thought it was SUE.
It's all right. I was going to be a doctor if I didn't teach music. Somebody asked about the meeting time. It's 7:30 for the meeting tomorrow. I think it was Mr. Kramer. Oh, somebody was asking
Bill's
earlier.
meeting, correct?
Tomorrow.
EAC meeting?
Yeah. Right, is that 7:30?
Are you talking about the school board meeting?
Well, there's a meeting tomorrow, I saw.
School board.
Yeah.
The school board is having an agenda meeting at 7:30. It's an unspecified length. After that, they decided to have a special meeting to vote on the MR Writer thing. So unfortunately, if you want to speak, you may have to sign up prior to the first meeting, sit through it, and then you'll hear what, get your
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure. I was just looking on
That's the way I was.
Facebook. I am glad that you guys started doing the agenda meetings also. I've been to a lot of meetings. I just moved here a couple of years, or 2 years ago, but been to a lot of meetings in other municipalities. Those places have the agenda meetings, and they do serve the purpose of giving you time to research what's going on in the agenda in between, before it's voted on, and get questions answered so it doesn't bog down the regular meeting. So I'm glad you're doing that. One thing I wanted to ask, Mr. Farrell did bring up, the agenda online is a little tough to read. And I know that sometimes when you're doing the webpage, the formatting could be tough. So maybe one suggestion could be, instead of printing it like you're printing it on paper, you can print it to a PDF and then just put the PDF of it the same way that we have it here online. The other thing I wanted to ask was, I was here for the tax collector meeting, and it's very difficult to hear. I know I'm like partially deaf, I teach music, so I cannot hear what's going on, but I was wondering if there's a reason that the meetings are sometimes down here and not up there where you have the microphones. I know, I see these microphones there, but they're not picking up as well, I guess. But maybe we can have the meetings up there so we can hear what's being discussed, because there was a lot of things I missed that I didn't quite understand what was going on at that meeting, if we could do that. The last question I had was about the ward, the seats for the ward. Again, I just moved here, but I don't understand, if you have the 4 wards and you have 2 seats in each ward, why 2 seats for any ward would ever be up in the same election. And I don't know if it's been discussed before, possibly correcting it. I don't know how it came about that way. I know they just reorganized the government in Bristol Township, and that created kind of an issue for a couple elections, and maybe that's the case here, I don't know. But has it ever been discussed, or has it been decided that we want to keep that way, or just not discussed that maybe Ward 2 having one of the seats only go for a 2-year term, and then it will correct itself, and then it will be a 4-year term from that point
Hey,
on.
Joe, I don't normally like to, it's public
Wait,
comment.
this is public comment, Dave, you can comment after.
Okay, yeah, so it's just something to consider. It seems like it would make more sense if it were every 2 years you had a seat in your ward up for election, rather than having both at the same time. But again, I'm not sure how it came about, or what the history is behind it, but just something to consider. That's all I have, thanks.
Thank you. Curry,
It's not good, that's good enough.
give me a hand with this, Curry.
Holt Henricks. Hi, Kurt Holt Henricks, 300 Melvin Avenue North. Tonight, just want to go over one thing. Saturday was a stark example of how quickly a routine action can turn very dangerous. On behalf of the Morrisville Town Watch, we want to express our gratitude for the actions of the corporal on Saturday, 14th. He placed the community above his safety, and we want, as a town, to thank him for his actions. The Town Watch would invite everyone out March 3rd at the Town American Club to share an appreciation for him and all the Morrisville Police Department. We'll be having homemade soups, breads, pizza, and there will be a little award, a plaque that we got for him that we'll be presenting to him. I want to thank him very much from the bottom of our hearts for doing what he did. We wish that he's okay. So March 3rd, 7 p.m., with everyone come out and just show our gratitude for what these men and women do every day in our borough. And that was it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, thank you, Vic. Joe, not to, I just want to try to explain that the question you had asked was about elections and wards. It's not up to council. Actually, a lot of what I heard tonight isn't up to council. Borough code says when there's a vacancy, the vacancy gets filled, as we just saw with tax collector, until the next election. So it probably started out every other one, but over time, when people leave, move, whatever the case may be, and there's a vacancy, Borough code says this is how it's handled, and that's why it's different. So it's not really something that this council can say, hey, we want to change it. We're governed by Borough code.
Yeah, I know they used to have a mayor, now they do different things with Bristol Township, they had to vote to change that code. They used to have boards in Bristol Township also.
All right, public comment is ended now. We can move along.
Can I have the floor for a minute, Vic?
Who's that?
Is everybody done?
Everybody's finished? Yes.
I'm sorry.
What
Okay,
now?
I'm sorry, I didn't know proper protocol that I had to sign in.
Yes, you do.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Catherine Schell. You appointed me last meeting, and I want to thank you. And I'm going to try to do the best I possibly can do to serve the taxpayers of Morrisville. So this is the face with the name, okay? If you have any questions, please feel free to email me, and I'll answer any questions, okay?
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Deb?
Everyone's done? If I could just ask a couple questions, like, what Jean brought up about the vote on that resolution, when I look at those minutes, she is correct, and if we could ask the solicitor to clarify that, it's probably something that we do need to clarify that actual vote. It's not changing the number of the vote, it's just making it legal, the resolution, because when all that started going back and forth, all it states is that the name would be inserted, but there is no motion after that that says we're actually voting the motion, voting the resolution, which is something we have to do. So if Mr. Volcani could clarify it for me.
Okay. In your opinion, Mr. Kilkenny, was the vote legally?
Yes.
Thank you. Anyone else? I would answer some of the questions that came up. The trust fund, there's $20,000 in that trust fund. It's actually costing the borough more money to maintain that trust fund than we're getting back. What does it cost, $1,200 a year?
It cost us $1,167.21 a year to maintain that trust fund, and there's only $21,000 left in the trust fund right now. The trust fund was deemed for beautifying and improving Williamson Park.
We will make sure that when we convert that money, it will be done properly and legally. The billboard, I understand the billboard is in, or part of it is in, I think the footing is in, right? Okay, it's on your report?
We'll go for it.
Okay, anything else from council? The bulletin board, I'm sorry, I thought that's what we were talking.
I mean the kiosk thing, she
Yes.
called it before, whatever it is. So we're gonna actually put one outside soon?
The kiosks were ordered, the kiosks are here, and they will be put up weather permitting.
You have to get footing.
Okay. In the meantime,
It's been snowing, and they're both here. They're lighted kiosks, they're made out of like a plastic that's supposed to last like 50 years. They're a glass bulletin board with a rubber backing inside, and they have LED lighting. We're gonna get an electrician. They're gonna be one on each side, and they're beautiful. So, but they'll be put up weather permitting.
Okay. Anything else? All right.
yeah, one more thing. Mr. Setzer had mentioned about the letter from the school. Did we get any response from them?
Not that I know.
No? No one knows? Thank you.
Okay, next item, approval of minutes, regular borough council meeting of December 15th, draft 3, do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second that.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on those minutes?
Just one. On the page 11, the last page, when I reviewed the tape, there's a sentence in there that was never said at the meeting. Just above where it says adjournment, it says Ms. Smith announced that they may not want to stay because after we close the meeting, we are going to an executive session. First of all, I was around the meeting, I would never say that. And Nancy didn't say it either. So I reviewed the tape several times and it was never said. So if that could just be removed, that sentence, and I'm good.
Any other comments? Call for a roll call vote.
Mr. Cicero.
Yes?
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Ms. Chronicle.
Yes.
Mr. Parker.
Yes.
Mr. Sanford.
Yes.
Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Kerner.
Yes.
And Ms. Sherlock.
Regular Borough Council meeting of January 20th, 2015, draft 3 to include draft 2 revisions. I hear a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Do we have a roll call vote?
Mr. Cicero.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Ms. Chronicle.
Yes.
Mr. Parker. Mr. Sanford.
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Kerner,
Yes.
and Ms. Sherlock.
Special Borough Council meeting of February 3, 2015, draft 2. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second that.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Yes?
that the tax collector would start on February 2nd, which is what I said, but it's actually supposed to be the 3rd, so I'd like to make that correction.
Anyone object to that correction? Okay, give me a roll call vote.
One question.
Yes?
Are they gonna do a change on the, real estate tax, that it would be borough tax, collection of borough tax?
The borough tax,
Right.
The borough tax collector is a provision of the borough code. It's an elected office. It's understood the borough tax collector collects all levels of taxes to include school district, and county, and borough.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Give me a roll call on this one.
Mr. Cicero.
Yes?
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Chronicle.
Yes.
Mr. Parker.
Yes.
Mr. Sanford.
Yes.
Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Kerner.
Yes.
And Ms. Sherlock.
Yes.
Moving on to 7, reports, administrative management, the manager's report. Anything, Mr. Bates?
Okay, under the manager's report, I gave you the rebate last month of $500 for Johnson Controls for the boiler. This month, we had $4,850.12 rebate for the traffic lights. Also, we had a $30,960.69 rebate from PICO for the interior and exterior LED lights. You heard about the Williamson Trust Fund, Planet Fitness. In the police contract, we have to get an outside physical training center for the police. I negotiated with them for $100 a year for the full-time police officer. There are 10 police officers full-time, it would be $1,000 a year. They will waive all startup fees. Also, Planet Fitness will, for all borough and MMA employees, will waive the startup fees and do the $10 a month fees. I told you about the kiosks are here. Tony DeMario from the Morrisville Little League. We had some talks with Tony. As far as our fees, this is what the Little League wants to do. They said they were definitely unprepared for us as far as knowing about our fee schedule. This is up to council, and it's for council's discussion tonight too. They would like to give us this year $9,000 towards instead of having a per Little League fee. And then next year, they would raise it $1,000, and every year raise it $1,000 for 5 years, up to the $13,000 until they're used to our fees. If council wants to discuss that tonight and determine if they want to. No.
No.
We're not gonna discuss it.
But they should think about it and maybe
Yeah, we can
discuss it
talk
the
next
next month.
It's not on the agenda. Solicitor's report.
No report tonight, Councilor Cicero.
The engineer report here? No engineer. The mayor's report.
Yes, thank you.
Mayor Revelle.
I suspect many of you have heard about the unfortunate incident that occurred over the weekend. It was a real relief that the officer involved received only minor injuries. I touched base with the officer a couple of times over the weekend. We do suspect he'll return to active duty before the end of this week. I'd like to recognize the members of the Morrisville Police Department for 2 recent major drug arrests. I'd like to recognize that the first one was led by Officer Mike Deaney, and the other arrest was led by Corporal Mike Pitcher. Recently reached out to Senator Chuck McElhaney regarding Senate Bill 1340, which would amend Title 75 to allow municipal police the ability to utilize radar for speed enforcement. The senator, just about, I think it was 4 days ago, got back to me. He said he would support any legislation if that comes in front of him for a vote. He's behind it. So that's good news. I see a motion on tonight's agenda for 3 new police vehicles. I'm happy to see this motion. I personally think it took some unnecessary work to get it to this point. Last week, the borough manager was under the impression that the vendor was not with the CoStar's program, which would have made an illegal contract. Of course, this is not the case. Mr. Beige followed up by contacting the borough solicitor, who in turn reached out to the chief and myself. We were able to clear everything up. However, if the manager reached out to George or me, we could have certainly saved some taxpayer money by not having the solicitor involved who works on an hourly rate, which he's sitting here, and it's only fair he should be paid for what he's working on. This leads me to a couple of things I hope the policy committee will address. I personally feel there's something wrong in that the administration can call the solicitor without notifying a department head. This particular instance, it was the police, but I feel this way for all the departments. Then the legal charges go to that department. I'd like to see a policy in place that it would be necessary for the manager to contact the department head before contacting the solicitor. And although I've asked many times to be included with emails pertaining to police issues, and the manager did say he'd CC me in this, and he has, so I'll be getting some CCs. However, there's no policy in place regarding the dissemination of information when phone calls are used instead of emails. So I'd like to see if the policy committee can do something in regards to that. Yesterday, it came to my attention when I stopped by the station to see the chief that the outer doors were locked because the borough office was closed for the holiday. This created a situation where no one could come to the police counter because the police department was open. In the future, may I suggest that the outer doors are left unlocked and post that the borough is closed on the 2 borough office doors. It's probably a rare situation, but I think that would be more appropriate. Also, it's been brought to my attention for some reason that it's been spread around that we are in the middle of a snow emergency. That is not the case. There's no snow emergency. But I would like to give my compliments to our Public Works. I think they handled the removal of the snow very professionally. It was actually very nice when I came home to see blacktop down, not just snow. That is the extent of this report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The police chief's report. The police chief's report is next. Yes. After the police chief's report, we'll all have a chance to talk. Go ahead.
Good evening, council.
Good evening.
Another fine month by the police department. I'll start out with the training that we've been doing. I sent officers to homicide and aggravated assault training in Abington for 2 days. We've started the program with Philadelphia that we're sending our officers down there to do crime scene training. The officers will come back with a new appreciation of where they work after spending a couple of days down in Philadelphia. That was just added over top of the training. Our SRO is in Hershey this week for a multi-hazard planning with the state police. In March, I will be attending the 11th annual Pennsylvania Law Enforcement Accreditation Conference. This is the beginning of getting our department accredited, which will be huge. So we're going to start that in March. It's going to be a long process and it's not going to be easy. So we're going to do it.
Is this the accreditation that's done through the PHEs?
Yes, sir.
How much is that going to cost?
$75 and 2 nights hotel.
You're serious?
I'm not laughing. That's the class.
You have to dedicate an officer to that, though, right?
Yeah, you have to dedicate an accredited manager. Okay, we go into the first class, and I said this is going to be done overnight, and it's going to take time, but it's going to get done.
Okay.
And if we don't get accredited, at least you work in the direction of becoming accredited, and everything you do for your department is good. Equipment-wise, many of you have seen the expedition that's been repaired that came back after we hit the deer That was, and it's painted black now. That's not one of the new vehicles. That was just a deal that we were able to make out while we were getting that car fixed. Narcan, all the officers are now trained with Narcan. The paperwork has been signed with the rescue squad and their supporting doctor. And within the next day or two, I will be issuing that out for the officers to carry with them 24 hours a day. Arrests this week. The mayor mentioned 2 arrests. One, we arrested a male on Hillside Avenue. We made 3 controlled buys. We recovered 500 bags of heroin, along with $2,500 in cash during the execution of the search and seizure warrant. That male is still in jail under $250,000 bail. That investigation was run by Officer Deanne. Corporal Pitcher ran an investigation.